When you get into the water near the shore, whether you dive during the day or at night, it only takes you a few minutes to descend at most before reaching the bottom of the sea. And with very rare exceptions, all the species you see around you are known and have already been identified. But if you move a few tens of kilometers away from the coast, and you start to descend towards the deep ocean using a bathyscaphe or an autonomous rover, then no less than 2 hours of descent towards the great depths are necessary before reaching the bottom of the ocean. A region where new discoveries are commonplace. This autonomous National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration rover has been drifting a few meters above the abyssal plain for a few minutes, when suddenly, suspended at 5,000 meters deep, it passes in front of a submersible's headlights. A creature that had never been observed before, or that has, all in all, only been glimpsed a few times. This is Mania pina, an 8-meter-long squid with frail and distended tentacles that are 20 times longer than its body, and which leaves trailing like so many drifting fishing rods. Of this immense squid, from the abyss with large fins and the appearance of inverted puppets, of which we have known the existence for now 2 decades, we know almost nothing. Consider that before this observation, Mania pina had only been spotted a handful of times on the scale of the entire planet. All the fabulous creatures you are going to see today evolve in the deep ocean, a cold, pressurized region plunged into continuous black night that has remained unknown to us for a very long time. In the 19th century, people started becoming curious about what might exist, several hundred meters below the surface, by lowering nets into it. Most of the creatures that were brought up were strange forms of life that, long before they reached the surface, burst into pieces due to the imposed pressure change. Today, we have machines capable of momentarily going several thousand meters deep to film and enjoy the pleasure of observing and studying these fascinating inhabitants of a kingdom where the sun never rises. Few humans have ventured there, as can be counted on an octopus's arms, because most of the images that are brought up from the abyss are taken by autonomous rovers, connected by a long cable to the surface where teams control them. Here, the beams of the submersibles cross and illuminate regularly. The fabulous, mysterious, disturbing, frightening, and sometimes amusing or ridiculous. Soft things, dangerous, harmless, deadly, luminous or transparent. And above all, in staggering quantities, the unknown, the unfamiliar. In fact, the abyss is such a vast and unexplored realm that practically every mission that penetrates its heart discovers things that have never been seen before. The people you hear talking in the background are the operators or scientists who stayed on the surface, maneuvering the autonomous rovers. From these research and exploration missions, which are regularly broadcast live and during which their reaction often says a lot. About the exceptional side of some encounters, it must be said that practically on each dive, the scientists discover new species. And even when that's not the case, many observations are in themselves a small event because the rarity of some encounters makes each of them exceptional in their own way. The first time humans descended to see with their own eyes the total darkness that begins around 1,000 meters, it was a little less than a century ago. Simply hanging at the end of a steel cable, wound around a mechanical winch, and forced to observe the weight of darkness through a 7-centimeter thick quartz porthole. To withstand the intense pressure, they saw some mysterious shadows pass by. Today, despite the incredible technical progress made, only a few dozen machines for scientific purposes are scattered across the globe, able to descend to the abyssal plain depths, and the submersibles capable of taking humans there can be counted on the fingers of a hand that has been through a grinder. That's all we have to go explore and study a surface nearly twice as large as all the land emerged from the entire planet. In the eternal night of the abyss, the strange, the bizarre, and the unknown definitely have bright days ahead of them. Consider that in November 2021, researchers from the Mbari Institute spotted, during a dive 1,000 meters deep, this ghostly black jellyfish. For them, it was only the 9th observation of this fascinating animal made in 27 years, and that out of thousands of dives. Yet, one cannot say that Stygiomedusa gigantea is the type to go unnoticed. With its 4 ribbon-like arms that adapt to the current and can exceed 10 meters in length, this species is one of the largest invertebrate predators ever discovered in the ocean. And although it has been known since 1899 and is present between 700 and 7,000 meters in all the oceans of the planet except for the Arctic, this fascinating species of jellyfish has, on a global scale, only been observed 100 times in total. This is not a planet nor a spaceship, but indeed an animal. A gigantic jellyfish evolving between 600 and 2,000 meters deep and whose head alone measures more than a meter. When Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute biologists first found this species in 1993, they had to create a new subfamily to classify it. Aunt Eberonia grandrora is different from all the other jellyfish that were known at the time. What is particularly puzzling about this species is not so much that it doesn't have stinging tentacles or long fleshy arms to catch its prey, like Stygiomedusa, but that the number of its arms varies strangely, depending on observations, between 4 and 7. And that's about all we know about this enigmatic ball. The fact that we could miss something as big as this for so long should be enough to convince you that there are more treasures hidden beneath the surface of the waters, in the worlds below, waiting to be discovered than in all the natural history museums on the planet. Certain exploration missions can surprise, not by the species they feature, but by the global regions where they are found. This 1.5 meter long squid has long been observed only in the Western Pacific Ocean, before its presence was discovered on the other side of the world, in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Caribbean. What about this small, clear, psychedelic jellyfish that looks like a glowing hedgehog? It was long thought that it only evolved in the Pacific Ocean, around 1,000 meters deep, before encountering it in the Caribbean and even in the Arctic Ocean. Species thought to be exclusive to a specific region are often seen passing by other areas. Then, several years later, to come across, somewhat by chance, an identical specimen on the other side of the world. With its transparent and gelatinous skin, poor in scales, and its small, discreet and depigmented eyes that seem to have stared at the darkness for too long. This 3.937 inches long, ghostly fish, spotted at 543 yards deep, was previously never seen alive before this encounter. The photogenic humbo octopus, with fins resembling large ears screwed onto its head, has been known since the 1800s. But all these species remain steeped in mystery, given the difficulty of observing them in their habitat. This small, ghostly-looking octopus, peacefully perched 4,300 meters deep on a flat rock, is almost certainly an undescribed species. As for this strange and fascinating fish that we talked about at length in a previous episode, and which has bulbous green eyes, screwed inside a kind of sheath filled with transparent gelatin, from which it continually looks up to spot the passage of its potential prey. Encountering this creature usually leaves a lifelong impression. And yet, while the remote-controlled vehicles of the Mbari Institute have carried out nearly 6,000 dives for a total of nearly 30,000 hours of video, this fish, which lives between 600 and 800 meters deep in the twilight zone, has only been seen a total of 9 times. This huge crustacean attracted by the fish that the submersible came to deposit in the abyss is a Bathynomus giganteus, a giant deep-sea isopod that can reach colossal dimensions of the order of half a meter. And yet, although it is unreasonably large and has been known for over a century now, and they are found in the deep, cold waters of almost all the oceans on the planet, we still don't know much about the biology or behavior of these mysterious creatures, because the number of observations of these giant isopods can be counted on the legs of a crustacean. And why do we often know so little about deep-sea species? It's both because these environments are terribly difficult to access and the number of exploration missions that venture there are rare. Given the immense extent of these territories, but also because it is often extremely difficult to collect and bring back in one piece the organisms that evolved there. Already, many of the inhabitants of the abyss are soft animals, adapted to the conditions, reigning at great depths and not tolerating pressure variations during ascent. This fragility concerns not only the organisms. Transparent is mainly made up of water, such as jellyfish, ctenophores, or siphonophores, which, although they are often very widespread in the water column, are so fragile that collecting them often amounts to a feat. They also concern almost all of the deep-sea fish. These fantastic depigmented creatures, known as slugfish, and frequently observed in the abyssal trench at depths of over 6,000 meters, are extremely difficult to bring up, intact, because their gelatinous bodies are designed to evolve at very high pressures and their flesh never withstands ascents, during which they invariably disintegrate and liquefy. So much so that the slugfish transform near the surface into unrecognizable mush of pieces. Despite everything, over the past few decades, research institutes have managed to develop ingenious ways to sometimes collect and bring up certain species alive without damaging them. And when that's not possible, all that's left is to simply observe and study these fabulous animals in their environment. Recently, some institutions, such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute or the Schmidt Ocean Institute, have developed systems that allow for three-dimensional scanning of creatures, too fragile to be brought up. The craziest part is that despite all the undeniable technological progress, we are still advancing in the abyss, like somewhat groping in the dark. The robots, remotely operated from the surface via a long cable connected to the mothership, often have a speed limit of 1.64 feet per second. Once they reach the bottom of the ocean, the rover's spotlights can only illuminate the vast mysterious expanses of dark water for about 30 meters around. The onboard sonars can only provide terrain details within an average 200-meter radius. Thus, even superficially exploring an area of 1 square kilometre usually takes nearly 3 hours. And when you dive on a terrain for the first time, you almost always don't know what you're going to find there. Forests of lush corals and sponges, or vast, deserted expanses, partly abandoned by the living. Even equipped with the most modern technologies, we remain partially blind in the land of eternal night. Fortunately, even though the rovers that descend to these great depths emit intriguing mechanical hums, while continuously spitting out intimidating light that can scare away some animals, the vast majority of abyssal inhabitants ignore or tolerate the presence of these machines, and many observations are even made, because it is they who come to us. And it is not uncommon for animals that live continuously in the abyss or are just passing through to appear surreptitiously under the spotlights of the rovers, as if intrigued by the two lasers measuring the size of the observed objects, or the clicks emitted by these strange machines. If a creature is evolving at great depths, it explains the rarity of encounters. It is indeed the legendary giant squid which, with their length of nearly 20 meters, their mass of nearly a ton, and their eyes as voluminous as a football, are the largest invertebrates on the planet, but also the least known. Although these creatures are ardently sought after and exist in quantity, given the number of their beaks that can be found in the stomachs of sperm whales. It was not until the 19th century that tangible evidence of their existence was found, moving them from the realm of myth to reality. For 150 years, specimens were only observed dead, washed up on beaches, or very rarely alive, often caught in nets or drifting, sick and lost near the surface. And no one immortalized any living ones in their natural habitat before 2004, when the first one was photographed. 20 years later, we only have 2 videos of a few seconds each, of these legendary creatures evolving in the great depths. Thus, the total observations of giant squids that have been fleetingly glimpsed in their natural environment still remain today well below their number of arms. The most studied part of the deep ocean on the entire planet is most certainly Station 1000. Located nearly 300 kilometers off the coast of California in the Santa Barbara region and some 4 kilometers deep. This station, with its numerous robotic surface platforms, has been studied in depth, width, and breadth by the MBARI teams for almost 30 years now. Here, they often use manned submersibles and remotely controlled autonomous rovers to descend. They deposit mobile laboratories at the bottom, collect sediments, set up traps, and carry out a host of other measurements, often several times a year. And yet, despite having made thousands of dives, they continue to discover new and unexpected things on practically every outing. In reality, regardless of the location on Earth, each dive into the depths of these forgotten realms comes with its portion of unlikely encounters. And by highlighting some of the wonders hidden in the depths of our oceans, these missions also reveal, by contrast, the extent of our ignorance. And maybe that's the most exciting part of this story. All over the world, rover pilots will tell you with each descent, it's the feeling of setting foot. Or rather, the metal claw controlled on another planet, largely unexplored and located just beneath the surface of ours. Once in your life, take the time one day to stop for a few hours on a broadcast. You will then be one of the privileged witnesses of absolutely crazy moments of life, but also of many discoveries. Sometimes even, we hear some biologists practically discover a new species live. This snail, which rapidly moves at 543 yards deep, had never been observed before. Until the 1830s, almost all scientists agreed that in the deep ocean, in the absence of light and therefore plants, there was no longer any life beyond 500 meters deep. Indeed, how could one imagine that species could survive under such extreme pressure conditions, diving into the dark with practically nothing to sink their teeth into? And then, barely a decade later, when one of the first transatlantic telegraph cables was brought up for repairs, we were surprised to find it covered with corals and clams living on it, attached 2,000 meters deep. Against all odds, there are many forms of life down there, evolving in a world of darkness. And for more than a century, we were forced to explore these great depths blindly, as we could not descend directly. All research campaigns brought back life from the abyss by sheer luck. It's as if we were trying to understand the nature of those evolving on the surface of continents. From hot air balloons perched at night above a thick sea of clouds, while trailing large butterfly nets below, hoping to bring something up. From the 1950s, with the development of manned submersibles and cable-attached robots, deep-sea exploration truly began. And almost all the forms of life that we were discovering down there were then new to us. Since then, 70 years have passed. Passed like Alice on the other side of the mirror, from surface waters, and we continue to regularly sink, and above all, to bring up in quantity new things or things we simply thought had disappeared. Sometimes the discoveries appear to originate from a different era. In 1987, off the coast of New Caledonia, at 470 meters deep, we came across a field of crinoids. These unusual animals, with long bodies and a crown of arms, sometimes look like flower petals. And this field of crinoids was mainly made up of a species that we thought had disappeared 66 million years ago off the coast of Australia. In 2006, during a census campaign of underwater life, they came across a species of shrimp from the great depths that we thought had vanished, for 50 million years. In short, our species has travelled the Earth lengthwise, widthwise, and crosswise. And while about 50% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of a beach, we remain largely ignorant of the mysteries of the sea. Even today, certain areas of the globe, such as the South Atlantic, the underwater mountains of the Pacific, or the Southern and Arctic Oceans, remain largely unexplored. Thus, during each scientific study campaign of the deep ocean that is conducted, it is not uncommon to resurface after each dive, more than 50% of unidentified species. Over the past few decades, a new species living in the abyss has been described every 2 weeks on average. And even though we know about 200,000 different marine animal species, it is estimated that 90% of all marine fauna remains to be discovered. Today, while 12 humans have walked on the moon, only 4 have descended to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. At 1,063 yards below the surface, this is the deepest point in the ocean. And each time, the expeditions that have gone there have only stayed for a few tens of minutes, at most. At such depths, exploring usually involves a quick look before immediately returning to the surface.
All right, here we are. We're at 988 yards.
I have a happy passenger, as we're about to reach the bottom of the Philippine Trench for the first time in history by anyone.
Do you see the bottom?
To this day, barely, seabeds located beyond 218.72 yards deep have been accurately mapped. And the reliefs of the surface of Mars are today for us, more detailed than those of the abysses of our own planet. By scanning the depths of space with our telescopes, we have gradually pushed back the unknown beyond the horizon. The object has remained partially submerged near the shore and only a few kilometers away, just beneath the foamy waves. The deep ocean is definitely one of the last frontiers to explore. Down there, a little further down, we practically don't know what's there. Everything at the borders of our current knowledge exerts an irresistible fascination. Beyond the initial astonishment, there is the pleasure of questioning what eludes us. Space, like the abyss, is targeted with vessels directed downwards or upwards, and both allow us to escape a world that is too down to earth. Because our oceans and their associated imaginaries certainly have something a bit extraterrestrial. Sometimes I dream of Poseidon, not Mars. And since I'm not a machine and don't have a batter to protect me, behind several centimeters of metal thickness, to have the illusion of being able to go down that low, I dive at night. Our generation missed exploring Earth's surface and arrived too early to explore the universe, but perhaps just at the right time to explore the ocean, to illuminate the myriad mysteries submerged beneath the seas. How many secrets hidden on the ocean floor remain undiscovered? With the exploration of the deep sea, a veil has been lifted on a new world, revealing the existence of a kingdom of darkness ruled by the strange, the bizarre, and the wonderful. And where, beneath our planet, in a dimension that can only be accessed by robots, live creatures for whom surfacing would mean certain death. In the same way that the few fish around me are just as incapable as I am of venturing and surviving even a few hundred meters below. In the meantime, and in the absence of having gone into the abyss, I resurface each time slightly different simply from having descended, enriched from having evolved under the sea. Perhaps one of the experiences that comes closest on Earth to a journey into space? Diving underwater is often said to impose silence. After spending so much time disturbing the beams of light from our lamps, the fish, who have no eyelids, cannot protect themselves. I think it's time to go back to living in the air and to definitely turn off the light.
What is that?
It's an anemone.
No, it's not.
It's called Alicia.
Fantastic, an anemone.
I haven't seen one of these probably in a decade.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to discover formats as short as the reach of the rover's headlights, follow me on Instagram, support me on Typee, and subscribe or turn on notifications if you haven't already. This episode, full of unknowns, could not have been made without the support of the City of the Ocean and the Biarritz Aquarium. If you're in southern France, visit the City of the Ocean and the Biarritz Aquarium. It's a guarantee of spending a moment in a bubble, away from the world of Earthlings, having privileged access to the underwater mystery. At the aquarium, you can closely observe many fascinating underwater creatures. On the other side of the glass of one of the largest tanks in France, you can let yourself be lulled by the enchanting grace of about 10 different species of sharks, like those in other tanks, of jellyfish with undulating umbrellas. At the City of the Ocean, you'll find a wealth of engaging and informative ocean-related content. In this amazing place, thanks to interactive and immersive experiences, 3D animation simulators, you can listen, touch, feel the big and small stories of the ocean. And this, from the tropics to the poles of the surface, from the waves to the great abyssal depths where the sunlight never descends.